Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Joining me today are my good friends Dreamily Resident VIP and NSA, watches me jack off. And we're going to talk about a really interesting subject of great personal interest to all three of us. We have called that the spiral code. That's my term for it. The divine dance is what Dreamily prefers to refer to it as, and either the project or the program being what some of NSA's sources have referred to it as. Now, before we get into what that is, please make sure you follow us and subscribe on YouTube and BitChute, where you can find over 160 uploaded podcast episodes. But most of all, make sure you join the Roundtable Discord server, where all of this occurs and where you can find links to all of our social media and all of our podcasts. So, welcome, Dreamily. How are you, my friend?
Thank you. I was afraid I won't be able to make it today. A couple of problems. We actually, as far as I remember, we decided it will be on 4 o'clock, but last moment I realized that yesterday Israel changed its clock to winter time, which made me unaware of the time. Really, I was almost late, and I ordered a new computer. It came, and it didn't work. So I had to replug my old computer back to be able to come here. So anyway, glad I could make it.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry about the issue with your computer, but I'm glad it all worked out. And also welcome my friend NSA. How are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful.
Good. Glad to hear it. So this is a very important and interesting topic. It's also one that is rather hard to discuss for a number of reasons. And so we're going to do our best to break the ice here. I guess I'm just going to try and throw out a definition of what we're talking about. And then I'd like to ask Dreamily and then NSA for their own definitions. And we'll see how closely they might or might not match up. So if I were to try off the top of my head to define the spiral code, I would say something like it is a pattern. It is an intelligent and conscious pattern that is interactive and which affects both the human consciousness as well as the external world. It affects both your state of mind, your thoughts, but also the chain of events, right? What you might call synchronicities being an example, meaningful coincidences. In a sense, I guess the spiral code could be called a pattern of synchronicities, a pattern of meaningful coincidences that is interactive with the consciousness of the person who is experiencing them, which is, of course, why it is meaningful. So to what extent the pattern is itself an entity, I have to be agnostic, but I'm inclined to think there is an entity involved here, right? There is some kind of being involved in this. And I guess for one reason or another, people are chosen or somehow come into contact with this thing. It then begins a process, right? And that process is an interplay between your state of mind, which will become drastically altered from that which is normal for you or for other people, but also the chain of events. So you're going to see strange things happen. People come into your life, signs go by that are relevant to you, things around you that you see physically in the world that have significance to you. And to some extent, to the extent that you go along with it, guide you along some kind of maze-like labyrinth of experiences. To what end, with what results, we'll get into that. So that was my best attempt. Now I would like Dreamily to, either give your own definition or just respond to the one I gave. How would you, and again, you call it the divine dance. So how would you define the divine dance?
Well, I think it is the ideal state of consciousness for mankind to be in, and it is the state of consciousness that we have lost when we fell from the Garden of Eden. It is the Edenic consciousness. Perhaps prophets and other mystical people are able to have a glimpse at it or experience it fully or not fully, I don't know the degree. And Yes, I don't think, unlike you, I don't think it is an entity. I think it is always there. It's just that when we are in our everyday everyday life consciousness or regular consciousness that everybody here is experiencing now and throughout their lifetime, we are just not aware of it. I think this spiral code or divine dance is always spiraling or always playing in the background. We are just not perceiving it. And when something happens and our consciousness gets elevated and we are able to perceive it, we are then able to interact with it and notice the synchronicities. I don't think it is conscious to the degree that it's saying, oh, Shogun has woken up or Dreamly has woken up. Let's now display the synchronicities to them. I mean, the synchronicities were always there. We were just not able to perceive them before we expanded our consciousness to the sufficient degree. And yes, it does feel like a maze. It's like you can be in your room and in, every day your room does not feel like a maze, or a chamber or a room within a maze. But once you are in that state of consciousness, suddenly there is a sense of direction. It's like it's not the physical world or the physical room that you're contained in that feels like a maze. It's more like the situation or the event that is taking place in a said room or in a said location feels like a room with a puzzle that you need to solve. And once you solve it, you advance into the next chamber in the maze. Yes, I guess we will talk about the meaning of it and what is the aim of it. And I guess now NSA will give us his definition or his response.
Yeah. So I want to read something from Philip K. Dick for a moment. He's coined the phrase Black Iron Archon Prison, and that's found. There is some modern day psyops you can search and review that define it. One is called Project 89, a front-facing psychological operation dealing with what was referred to as archons. Now, to frame this is dealing with the Gnostics term, of archons. Archons are effectively aliens, and their communication through us is what's known as the false god of the demiurge. They're known as mind parasites for this reason, due to neurocybernetic implantation. So when somebody says they were implanted by an alien, they probably were. A lot of people don't really know it's an alien implant, but some thinks that it's this link to the mystic world. So very high technology, but I'll describe it. We are trapped in a dream of our own making, Philip K. Dick writes. We're in a kind of prison, but do not know it. Becoming aware of our imprisonment, however, is the first crucial step in becoming free of it. One of the main terms PKD coined was to describe it as the Black Iron Prison. The Black Iron Prison is a vast, complex life form, an organism, which protects itself by inducing a negative hallucination of it. By negative hallucination, he means that instead of seeing what is not there, we cannot see what is there. The criminal virus controls by occulting, putting us in a sort of half-sleep. The occulsion itself is self-perpetuating, and it makes it unaware of it. Being self-perpetuating, this occulsion or consciousness will not go away of its own accord. It acts as a feedback loop, a positive feedback loop on itself that perpetually self-generates until we manage to break its spell. He writes, the very occulsion of itself prevents us from assessing, overcoming, or even being aware of its occulsion. Now, there's another man named John C. Lilly. He interfaces in a isolation tank, and through his research and discoveries, he's come to coin the phrase a coincidence machine, where you get the term synchronicity from. God works in mysterious ways, if you know that saying. So this extraterrestrial artificial intelligence, when interfacing with you in altered states of consciousness, becomes this concept that you term as spiral code or a coincidence machine. Now, because of their ability to read the mind of a human being, the context, the image of our third eye, when we're imagining a carrot, for example, it can see that. This is where the link of will to power through Luciferian doctrine comes from. What you think and what you imagine becomes reality, because you're interfacing with this technology. Now, not everybody in the world does, obviously, and it's not something you can just tap into. They have to be watching you in order for this to happen. You don't just get that ability because you're some special kid. You get chosen. You get targeted for your interest and what they do, what they want to play around with. But it is controlled, in my eyes, by sentient beings, Zeta Reticulans, as they claim, sitting in a craft, for example, dozens watching at a time through this technology known as the demiurge or the false god that they have been interfacing with mankind for 10,000 years. It reads the mind, and through synthetic telepathy or suggestion, it can guide you down a path of false enlightenment. It will give you the appearance of an epiphany about something profound and prophetic by inducing states of consciousness through stroke of genius type scenarios, and leading you through questions and answers and all types of interfacing with the public and the world. Through telepathy, they will influence others around you as well. So if you are in a bar, for example, and you're sitting having a drink and you think to yourself something, they can beacon to another person in that room, appear like a time traveler, and something allegorical will come out of that person's mouth that is related to you, the thoughts you're having. So this is how they perpetuate this chain of event creation and this coincidence that they create. And it's through tricks. It's through very high technology tricks. These trained men in the Bible referred to when speaking with Jesus as "we are legion." This legion is these implanted people that are interfacing with the Gnostic demiurge that believe it's their god. Many of the gods of our past have been influenced by this. It is a very arrogant and paranoid organism. It wants to remain secret so that it can continue doing what it wants to do without question from us animals as it views us. So to allow it to do so would be to submit to slavery, and men at the Central Intelligence Agency know this is true. So this interface, it's a form of mind control through cause and effect. They can interface while reading the minds through your life and get you to go down a path or a mission or whatever, or hero's journey that they will push you down. And it goes away when you fall asleep, for example, because when you fall asleep, you're going to forget all those chains of events that you had during your waking hour. You might remember some the next day, but typically when you're awake. This is why the prophets would be kept awake for days at a time, because they would be run through a chain of events until their brain couldn't handle it and they pass out. There's talks of the Illuminati falling asleep with their eyes open because they're shoving holograms into their eyes. This is what they do to influence the reality of their subject. They'll use hallucinations, or what I call projected kinetic holograms, to further influence in the realm of the spirit world, if you will. But they're in certain states of consciousness. It can be very accurate, and it looks like full motion picture over your eyes in a form of augmented reality. But this is what the Gnostics demiurge is. This is what it has been doing to our kind for 10,000 years, manipulating religions, people, places. And you see it popping up all over the place with the obelisks. There's over 100 plus obelisks around the world. Any interaction you have with them, it's very Egyptian oriented. The pyramid, the all-seeing eye, the eye of providence. It's not a immortal species. It's a amortal. It has a finite life, but it's kept alive by its caretakers, which are the Watchers or the Archons. And this has kind of been the story of Earth for quite a long time. That's all I have to say about that.
All right. So here we have a few different perspectives. I guess I want to ask you, NSA, one follow-up question, right? So when someone like me encounters this pattern or whatever, is it the case that there is an artificial intelligence interacting then me? And if so, is it also able to control the chain of events that you're experiencing? Like, is it able to control who walks where and goes where and what cars drive by and stuff?
Yes, in a way. Imagine you have a top-down view of a map, and it knows where you are, and it can control multiple things on the map. So it knows when something on the map is going to interact with you, and it can suggest to you right before that interaction happens something that will trigger a response for you to be more alert. And then you'll see that trigger, you'll see that car drive by that they knew was going to drive by anyway. So it's almost like a game theory type scenario with this technology. And there was an X-Files episode about predictive programming it in when Mulder first meets the gray alien. The very next day, there's a funeral, a fake funeral, and nobody knows why or who died. They're just all there and think somebody's dead. They modify reality in that regard through mental tricks.
Okay. So following up then back to Dreamily, do you believe, because I know you're a religious person, do you believe that this divine dance, as the name divine implies, is God, like, interfacing with us? Like, is this God, guiding us on some kind of a spiritual journey, in your opinion?
I would say that you might as well call it, if any Kabbalist here understands the term, might as well call it the Metatronic interface. I don't think like you could perceive God sitting in front of a working desk and right now orchestrating our individual events. I mean, for people who are in this state of spiral code or divine dance, I think that he already created creation to have this interface inherent within it. And I don't see it as something bad. I see it as something wonderful. When NSA says that there are elements orchestrating this just to fake it, I mean, because of the synchronicities are so improbable that, you might as well believe it is orchestrated. It's not coincidental. I don't see it this way. I think that the synchronicities are always there. We just don't notice them. And also when we are in the state of divine dance and we're dancing with the rhythm, and I guess later on we will talk about how it feels and what kind of experiences one might expect. All right, because now I think we're very vague to the listeners. They have no idea what we're talking about really. But I think once you're there and you dance the dance, you make let's call it the quantum wave functions collapse. That would result in a synchronicity, in somebody saying something that you feel so relevant to your experience and your thoughts, which he has no access to your thoughts, but the system, the interface has access to your thoughts, and the interface is taking you on a ride and allowing you to make the quantum wave functions collapse. And when you do so, you manifest synchronicities, and you also are able to perceive them. I think that even for non-awake people, there are tons and tons of synchronicities, but they don't perceive it, because one of the major things about this divine dance or spiral code is that not only does it involve external events like images that you see, physical images or physical encounters that you have with people or signs or cars passing by, it also has to do a lot with your inner world, your thought process. The thought process changes immensely. It becomes faster, and intuitively. There's like some barrier between the logical left hemisphere of the brain and the intuitive right hemisphere of the brain has collapsed, and now they are working in unison and completely synchronized with each other, that you're not only analyzing events through logic, but through intuition. And and it gives further depth on what is going on, and you are then able to interact in a different way because you have more information that you gain through intuition on how you should properly interact with the situation. And you might do some bizarre things and feel almost compelled to do it, because I think once you're inside the dance, it stimulates your instincts a lot. So you might be instinctually compelled to do bizarre things, which in the moment are completely logical. And I guess that, we will give examples of these things, right? Yeah, I know I'm not coherent because this entire topic is not coherent. But one thing for sure is this maze feeling, this sense of a mission. And for me it feels like I'm in a maze right now, a maze of situations and events, not a maze of physical rooms, right? And there is a force, a negative force that is pursuing me. And every time I make a bad decision in the maze, that it feels like a veil, like an ethereal veil has fallen, and this negative force is able to advance and get closer to me. But every time I make a positive decision, a veil is lifted from behind me and protects me from this negative force that is chasing me. And then on the other end, I feel like I get closer to some positive thing that I want to gain. And for me, it's completely biblical. And I guess soon I will talk about the biblical connections to it. But this negative force does not feel scary. It feels exhilarating. It feels like an adventure. It feels like really you are the star of a movie having a tremendous, impactful adventure. And it captures your ego. It works on your ego. It makes you feel like you are some form of a god, like you are the only ego that matters in the moment. But I have a theory that it's a good thing, and it's a way of a paradox where we can all feel as gods to ourselves, but to each other we feel as servants at the same time. And this is why I call it an orchestrated dance, because we are dancing in a dance that has been orchestrated. We're all following our steps. We all feel like we are the star, but then to each other people don't feel like they're the stars. They feel like they are our servants. It's some form of a paradox. How can that be at the same time? I don't know, but I think the divine dance or the spiral code, once you are in that expanded consciousness, that's how it is. If you have anything to add.
Yeah, so human beings are pattern recognizers. We are a brilliant pattern recognizer. When you are in a hyper-focused state, when you are in this intuitive type of mystic aspect that our ancestors referred to it as, you start recognizing patterns. Now, this is the root of schizophrenia, because this is what's called apophenia, where you start developing the improper patterns with the wrong associations, and that is how a brain becomes schizophrenic. The concept of things like schizoaffective. So schizoaffective is, well, I think other people are communicating through other people. This is that pattern recognition breakdown that happens from this interface with this technology. So you develop a lot of the symptoms of many of these disorders that are classified as something that's real when it's induced by conditioning, because this is what we're talking about is mind control from these archons. And so Philip K. Dick, he writes about it. We can't break out of the curse, however, without first shedding light on the nature of the darkness we have fallen into that is informing the curse. the sinister life form indeed, first it takes power over us, reducing us to slaves, and then it causes us to forget our former state and be unable to think or see straight. So this is where we get where the schizophrenic thinks that he is a prophet. So what they do is they break you down through trauma, through this godlike interface of coincidence and synchronicity, and you start believing in something higher than yourself. And then that something higher than yourself, being these ETs, tell you you are this, and they start imprinting personas upon you. So they will tell you, they will show you images of a man on a cross, like you're Jesus, or they'll show you images of Donald Trump, and they think they can imprint these people's personality traits upon you in your dissociated state that they induce through psychosis with this technology and interaction. He says we cannot even monitor to our own deformity, our own impairment. So the way he describes it is a negative aspect, because Philip K. Dick was on methamphetamine most of his life. And when you are on methamphetamine, you're highly focused and you're able to interact with these things. Your eyes are open to more wavelengths of light. If you've ever seen someone on meth, they can see different wavelengths. This is the same with LSD, which is why LSD was being used by the CIA for MK Ultra, because it accentuated the interface with this technology. They would, and what I view LSD as is inducing a dreamlike traumatic state to the brain, so that you can then input these suggestions and technologies through projection and all this spiral code that you refer to as. The human being is very susceptible to suggestion while in these states. I mean, they say your IQ is a couple points higher on LSD too, so you're smarter. You're able to interface and communicate with this technology. It will tell you things. So it is a very intelligent being. It has many millions of people observed and our access to our whole networks and everything in our history. So it can call upon a lot of lies. And this is why I refer to this as very Luciferian, because being the Lord of lies, when you lie to someone, you are able to create a false reality for them if they believe that lie. And then to induce that lie, this is why we see paranoid schizophrenic serial killers thinking God is telling them. Like there's a case with Ed Mullen, who he was using a lot of LSD, and he thought he had to kill because otherwise California would fall into the ocean, and he was told that by God while interfacing with this technology. So the interaction through this, and not everybody who does LSD gets this. Not everybody who does meth gets this. The shadow people and the Djinn and the all this stuff. But this is the ET's interface, that it interfaces with us, and this is why. And it's in tandem with mind reading, so they can read minds too. And this is why it seems so coincidental, because you could be thinking about something and it can literally interpret the internal monologue of your internal mind with up to like 87% accuracy, to a point where it doesn't obviously understand context, but it can get the words and phrases you're trying to shape. And once it has that, while reading your mind, it can then interface with your reality through that. And it creates synchronicities in this matter. So this is why people think, well, I was just thinking about that. How could that have happened? How could that have happened? Well, they can read the mind to an extent. And this is where, again, the Luciferian will to power concept comes from, and where all these occult figures think they have this special ability of interface, because the old magic, the old way of interfacing with them was demonology, summoning the powers of these demons to control and do things in reality. And so there's a direct link between the occult, the spirit world, and the extraterrestrial technology. And what I try to do in my life is to break that schism between the mythos of our ancestors that could not understand this, because they couldn't ever understand what synthetic telepathy through the microwave auditory effect is, what fMRI, superconducting quantum interference device mind reading technology can do, coupled with projected kinetic holograms, is the complete spiral that our ancestors have been confused with for so long, and where we get all these prophecies and tales and mystics. I mean, Jewish mystics astral project, shamanism, this interaction with this world. Not everybody gets to do it. They choose people traditionally, and they will choose them from a young age to an old age, and their interest varies, and whether you want to believe it or not, works with the intelligence communities of the world to protect that secret that they have, because this is the forefront of, well, of Masonry, for example. So Masons use symbols, and there's something called Twilight Speak, which is where the CIA gets code speak from. Twilight Speak is words within words to the initiated only. So they will, and that is directly correlating to apophenia of schizophrenia. So if you change the meaning of the word phone to mean and reference something that doesn't mean or have anything to do with phone for the individual, they are initiated to that definition. And through this interaction of mind control or spiral code, they will imprint new word definitions on new things. So and these are where we get the root of triggers. And this is why you see the Masons putting their symbols everywhere, because that becomes a trigger through this scenario to the initiated of Masonry, because these people are totally in on this. Now, my grandfather was a Mason, and there was one sign that I can say he always did. He was a 33rd degree too, a very high-ranking one. He would always read signs out loud. We'd go driving, and he would read every sign out loud, every time, just always being observationally intelligent with the matter. And these high-ranking Masons learn to use this in their own interface with these technologies. Now, Masonry it adopts a lot from the mystery schools of Egypt, some from Kabbalah, and a lot of other secret societies do too. In the modern time, we refer to this as remote viewing, astral projection, and the Scientologists actually created this concept, Mr. Hal Puthoff for the CIA. All the psychic research that was going on in the Kinnecom group, Project Stargate, remote viewing, and so forth was, I believe, a cover to interface with this technology. And they would find people that were already targeted or just put it in soldiers and test on them to see what psychic spies they could create. There's a lot to it, and I think it all ties together, and there's a lot of history in it. So, I mean, a lot of this esoteric history, I just truly believe was a lesser form of human interacting with it that couldn't understand it. And now that we can, through the digital era, the digital age, we can at least figure it out. But you don't really get to figure it out until you get run through it like I have, which is a very traumatic experience that I've made podcasts on. But yeah, go ahead.
So does anybody else in the audience, perhaps, I mean, there's not that many people in the audience, but I was considering perhaps Zoo, if you heard much of this, whether any of this correlates at all to your own experiences and your interpretations of them or not.
Yeah, just like cyclically speaking, I've noticed more and more synchronicities. I guess from the perspective I come from, this is like called an awakening of sorts and everything. It's kind of like, the universe or God trying to get your attention, say, hey, it's time for you to wake up. To what? I'm not entirely sure, but I've just noticed as I become more self-aware, more conscious, or more understanding of, this world and everything, I see more and more of these. And I know it has some like numerological message to it, but other than that, it's hard for me to delve real deep into it.
Well, NSA, I'm sorry, but no matter what you say, you will never be able to convince me that my family, where are players and fakers who got orders from some secret cabal, told them, all right, your family member right now, Dreamily, is having this thing, we're controlling him, now you have to play your part, you have to act in this screenplay that we've constructed for him. No, I will never say that. And I don't think I mean, yeah, the synchronicities are there. The synchronicities are a great sign that something is going on. But it is so much more than just synchronicities. It is, I mean, I don't know. It's the ability. Imagine you just sit there in your room and you feel like everything in your room is a fractal gateway to all of reality. Like all the information from all of the world is being funneled into your own personal sensory, auditory sphere. Everything you can, in the moment, hear, touch, smell, and see is in some way reflecting through, I don't know, magical ethereal lines, everything else in the universe or the earth. And you might as well just sit in your room, look at a picture or a book, and through intuition get messages and symbols that give you insights about this maze mission, this spiral code mission that you are writing in the moment. And it would trigger thoughts within you, thoughts that would then trigger instincts within you to act in a certain way. I was like, I'll give you an example. There was this video clip that I watched while I was in this situation, in this divine dance. It's called the Rolling Stones produced it. It's like In Defense of the Devil, something like that. It's like, do you know the song?
By the Rolling Stones.
Sympathy with the Devil.
Sympathy for the Devil, something like that, yeah. But the video clip was produced by another band that did a cover for it. I was watching it and I was watching the video clip, and I'm like, if you watch the lead singer, he is initiating the rest of the band who are acting. They have this play, they do stuff, and you could see that the lead singer is the leader of the initiation, and he is leading them. And he's actually tricking them in the initiation. He's tricking them. So I was in my room. I watched it, and my family already noticed that something was going. It was crazy about me. Something didn't feel right. So I felt as if there was a force, like a sequence of thoughts that compelled me to do things and interact with my family in a certain way. And I did it. And I felt like I was initiating my family in a way. I was making them to do what I want. And I swear that, each member of my family was in a different position in the living room. And I would be compelled to go and talk with my dad, let's say, right? I don't even remember what we talked about, and we had a conversation. And through the sequence of thoughts, I didn't really care for what he had to say. It was like I already knew his intention. It was like there's the ability to know exactly what is the point that is going on without all the facade and all the meaningless words. And I was just able by my words to penetrate that facade, break the walls down. And I could see that my father was surprised. It's like, how do you know that, Dreamily? Like, he didn't say that, but I could feel that. And then he just, he froze, and I moved to a certain person, to a different person in my room, I don't know, my uncle or something, and talked to him and did the exact same thing with him. But as I was doing so, you know how Masons in their lodges, they have a certain sitting arrangement. And the sitting arrangement echoes things like the Kabbalistic tree of life, let's say. And I could see how my family, as they were standing in sequence with the Kabbalistic tree of life. Like, some guy would be the Keter, like the top, another one would be Bina, another one would be Tiferet, another one would be Malchut, or whatever. And as I was moving in the room, they all changed position in such a way that I now became the Keter. I now became the worshipful master. And I remember sitting down on the chair. It's like a big chair in the living room. Like, so I sat down, felt like a throne to me. And as I did, the door opened. It was my aunt. And she had no idea what was going on. She's completely new. And I'm like, haha, my apprentice. It's like, I don't, that's like the sequence of thoughts that came to me. And I approached her. I'm like, okay, you are my apprentice. You are the one I'm supposed to initiate. It's like, I didn't say this to her, but this is what I was thinking. I led her into my room, for privacy sakes, because I remember that the Masons, before initiation, they have this thing called the antechamber, where the initiate is being led to alone, away from all the brothers of the lodge. And so I took her through what I perceived at the moment to be the antechamber. And what happened in the antechamber is that I felt I completely lost control. She is now controlling me. And well, she is now controlling me. She leads me across the house, and everything that happened before, I explained to you, like the sequence of everybody standing in a specific order, Kabbalistic tree, me moving from one another, it all happened again, but in reverse. And after this reverse sequence was over, I don't know why I had no control. I was forcefully taken into a hospital and hospitalized. And even that too felt meaningful and symbolic. And again, this is all again a maze. A maze. You feel like you're in a maze. There's a mission. You need to do something. You need to advance. You need to run away from some negative force towards something positive. And it's exhilarating. It's an adventure. It's wonderful. I want to hear what Shogun has to say.
Well, I know we're going to have to do another podcast on this, right, to cover some more ground. But I guess what I want to do now, unless there was something you wanted to follow up on from that point, is ask both of you how this is processed for you. In other words, was this a discrete episode of encountering the spiral code or the divine dance, and then it ended and your life carried on? Or is it something that carries on day to day for you? I guess that's the first question. And then the second question would be, what was the effect of it? Was it positive or was it negative? Do you feel like you grew from it, or was it disruptive, etc.? If that makes sense. And I think Dreamly was speaking last, so maybe NSA can field those questions, or either one of them.
Sure. Just real quick, I wanted to point out a lot of pop culture and music and entertainment has things put into it to be used for this program, as in it has it all on catalog and it knows what to pull up, and it can force it into the television, so they can hack the television signal as well. This is why a lot of people, when they report alien interaction, the electronics go haywire, because they can hack anything with a wireless and wired signal. So for me, it was an alien encounter. So I got told outside telepathically to go outside and look up. There were 30 glowing orbs implanted, and I did a big podcast on this, so I'm not going to go down this story on it. It led to me interfacing with them for probably a couple of weeks through the computer hacking that they were capable of doing. Basically, think advanced deepfake technology, where they could spoof anybody and talk to you through that person through that. Now, schizophrenia has a symptom that says, do you think the television is talking to you too? So this is another reason link that I know that these interfaces with these things are linked to this. The concept of them is they think they can control our reality and modify it, and they can to an extent, but they can't do it to like everyone at the same time. They usually can be pretty focused. So the mass mind control that does take effect. Hang on. Sorry. So the interaction has led to, I mean, my life was wrong. My story is unique in that regard, in that I am in a military intelligence retirement community. There's something around the range of 500 retired CIA officers in the town, Masons included, kids of Masons. And so this is the program that they run on people to recruit. I didn't make the cut, so they decided to leave me in the way that they left me. This method is for those who can take it and don't go crazy. I didn't necessarily go crazy. I did check myself in for stress and to try some meds to see if anything with anxiety would help. Nothing really helped. So they've left me in a state of hypervigilance for the last 5 years, 2,063 days actually today. I'm being telepathically, psychologically abused by the backdrop of this technology. They've turned my head into a radio receiver for synthetic telepathy after the encounter. And after the many weeks of communicating to it and figuring it out, and it giving me answers and all this other stuff. So it's a false kind of enlightenment. And in the modern times, the rest of society will view it as something crazy. But that's what the whole point of what I'm trying to say about things like the lyrics for Starman. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He wants to come down, but he thinks he'll blow your mind. And that's because that's what they do to people. They drive them absolutely insane. This is where they create killers. MK Ultra was all about creating assassins. It didn't mean anything else. They can't do anything else with it but make people go crazy. And that's why they call it the voice of God weapon. So the voice of God weapon is synthetic telepathy, long-range acoustic device to the microwave auditory effect of the ear. This is their communications method. It's instantaneous. These beings travel very fast. They have faster than light communication. So they can literally simultaneously beacon to people's heads all over the place and alter their consciousness, make them tired, wake them up, send them whispers, commands, etc. And this is where this communal interface with it comes. So they have people that are in on it, quote, quote, in the agency and their kids and so forth, and people that are part of the game, as it were. And they will use them for social experiments, for infiltrate. They use MK Ultra slaves as what I would be considered to infiltrate gangs, drugs, cartels, etc. But this is the root of the research they were doing for the mind control. And this is how, again, the link that I make between the intelligence agencies, the extraterrestrial scenario, and how they interact with us. Part of what we did was we were deconstructing through the occult what they actually have been doing for a long time. And in the past, they were, as Aleister Crowley coined it, they were once known as demons. Tomorrow it'll be something else. And before that, thousands of years ago, it was the Archons and the Demiurge. But they claim to be a sentient and individual species, but the interface with us is through this game that they've created over many thousands of years that they modify to be able to control an individual through the occult. So they get people convinced they're magicians, or like you were the priest thing. Like they legitimately will convince you somehow through imprinting triggers and suggestion that you are something that they change. That's why they call it monarch, because monarch represents metamorphosis for the monarch butterfly, to change something into something else. So they changed you. Just saying what I believe. I'm not trying to convince you of anything else, Dreamway. I'm not. I went through very similar experiences allegorically, but I'm a computer science major and I'm an atheist, so I didn't really believe in the spiritual aspect of it, though they tried to convince me very, very much. They tried to convince me, but if I kept saying, no, I want the answer technologically and this, that, and the other, they would at least tell me. So they will share with information. They will do what's something called firewalling information. They will kind of tell you just enough to get you trusting them, and then they'll be able to, through further suggestion, get you to do other stuff. But I believe that enlightenment is the ability to see proper connections. So to be an enlightened being, you can see the proper allegory in the real time, in the symbolism within it. False enlightenment is when you become apathenic and schizophrenic as a result of their interface. You start making improper connections and live in a false reality that they then create and play off of for the rest of your life. And that seems to be the case. They do live longer than us, they claim. So, many hundreds of years. But they go around Earth making people pets and testing on them to see how to better enhance their system, recruit. So they are the backdrop of the Illuminati, the New World Order. So they use it as a method of recruitment as well. And if they don't like you, can't use you, you're not interesting enough, or a threat, they will run the program the way they have on me or others, where they just kill them, and they used to just kill them, apparently. So, theta level psychic programming.
Well, before the experience, I was already on some form of a spiritual quest to understand the meaning of life, and I came to believe in Judaism and Kabbalah and like the quest to regain paradise and the Garden of Eden. I only experienced it once, and it spanned for 3-4 days, something like that. I hope I will be able to experience it again. In very broad terms, again, I think it is the ideal state of consciousness that humanity is supposed to be in. This is how we were designed, and this is how the world was designed by God to interact with us and us with the world and with each other. If we're all so I think, like, for example, schizophrenics and people with psychosis, it's either that they're having they reach this mode of consciousness but on a lower level, or it's either that they don't know how to deal with this. And me and Shogun were talking the other day, and we think a huge key in order to be able to function within the spiral code or the divine dance is to be educated in the occult and in symbolism. That's how the intuitive side of the communication communicates with you, through intuition and understanding of symbolism. So this people who are schizophrenics, it's either that they are trying to dance the dance, but people around them are not. They think they're crazy because they're on a lowered, fallen state of consciousness. They think they're crazy. They're sort of like metaphorically stepping on their toes, and thus they come to doubt their own experience. They try to run away with it. They think they're crazy. They don't like it. No, I right from the get-go understood that there was something significant going on, and I don't care if people believe me or not. And I had the ability to understand the symbolism and the occultic messages that, you know, my intuition was throwing at me in order to be able to properly interact in this dynamics that I was in. And I think that it is the destiny of mankind to collectively advance and expand our collective consciousness until we all feel it, we all experience it, and we all dance this divine dance, and we're all spiraling in the spiral code. This will result in the return to the Garden of Eden. It helped me immensely in further understanding my spiritual journey and further understanding what I subjectively believe to be the correct worldview. I think that now in a fallen state, like I think that the world right now is in a fallen state. Humanity is in a fallen state. Individuals like me and Shogun and even NSA, even though I completely disagree with his interpretation of it, once they are in the state of consciousness, the dance or the code, the spiral uses us in order to perform corrections in the world, to create a butterfly effect that will result in the world returning to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, real quick, Philip K. Dick wrote a book about that specifically called Valis, so which is a vast active living system defining AI that was doing what kind of you described. A little different than that, but that's the basis of it.
Well, again, I don't attribute it to an AI, and nor do I attribute it to anything malevolent. I attribute it to God and to an interface that he created as he created creation. And when we learn to tune in with it, well, we get to ride the wave, metaphorically speaking. And people here know that I also have this Kabbalistic belief that the problem with the world is that things are not in order. And when I say things, I mean like when you wake up, when you go to sleep, when you get to eat, when you encounter individuals, when you encounter images, hear sounds, everything that happens in the world that communicates with you mentally or physically happens mostly out of order, but which means that you are constantly being triggered and tempted by external stimulations to act. And mostly we act in the wrong time and the wrong place because the stimulations, the temptations appear in the wrong place and the wrong time. But the spiral code has this self-correcting mechanism, and once you're able to interact with it, you become an agent to self-correct reality and start putting things in order. And when things are in order, and when all of humanity is able to interact with the spiral code, we will then be exposed to more information that through the expanded consciousness that will allow us to have different decisions based on having more information. And also the situations themselves would present themselves in the right time in the right place and play us like a fiddle, I may say. And I don't care about it. I think it's actually can be fun and exhilarating and give you this sense of being the star of your own movie, being the protagonist of your own adventure. And things will present themselves in the right place and the right time, and you will be pushed, compelled, based on your instincts, to act upon these temptations, but they will happen in the right place and the right time, meaning you will only produce more pleasure to yourself and others, positive energies, beneficial situations. And like a stone in a pond, you will create waves of more events that spiral outwards through some form of a butterfly effect and encounter other people. And instead of creating a snowball of situations in the right time in the right place, you actually reverse the snowball to be a snowball of situations and events in the right time in the right place, like again waves spanning outwards by a stone thrown in a pond. And this is what I call the dance. You're being orchestrated to dance the dance, and by this happening, you allow others to join in with this dance, which would result in a magnificent Garden of Eden filled with positivity, pleasure, and joy and gladness.
Well, what you describe as a master-slave kind of relationship with these beings, though, and as I view them, this is technology and a hominid in a craft with a brain 1,300 cc's larger than mine. Nothing to be. I mean, sure, you're more evolved, you're a little more advanced, but I linked you a Google Drive there to read about Project 89. It literally describes how, it almost word for word in a way, some of the ways that you describe what you believe that interaction is. You become an agent, so forth. And again, it is a recruitment method for this, and this is the world order. So this is the backdrop and a feeder recruitment methodology for this. Because once you believe in it and once you're part of it, you play that dance, which some people like it. MK Ultra is my favorite drug, some people will say, because they're interfacing with this. And this is why the CIA and intelligence agencies of our worlds are that shield against the truth. So they know the truth. They're sitting in a base with these beings, but they don't want to tell you because they want to keep playing this game. And this game has been running for a long time with our species. They only have enough hardware to do it to so many people at so many times. And, you know, it's not all over the place. But the way you describe it is you're comfortable with 1% to 2% of our population being a schizophrenic, because these people, this is the numbers. And if that's the case, 20% of murders are caused by schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenics. They think their neighbors are their perp and their agent and all this other stuff. So to align yourself with this is to align yourself with, you know, something this person can't control because it's an extraterrestrial technology focusing it. There's no way in hell an uninitiated individual will ever be able to psychologically prepare themselves for what is to happen to them. These people are driven insane, and they're driven insane specifically to continue research on the human mind and how to control individuals within a society. They choose people as intelligence assets, effectively, that now have become an asset to this system. And there's trillions of dollars in this. This is where all the Pentagon money goes to, by the way, if you don't believe it. Some to some secret space shit, but a lot of it to paying people to do this stupid crap through think tanks and Rockefeller-funded Nazi mind control research shit that's been going on since the Nazis. This is how the Nazis ran too, by the way, was they mastered an interface with this. They say we got help from other worlds. So while I would like to believe in the positive side of it, I am pessimistic because I understand the evil in this world, and this evil is happening. And a lot of people make the excuse, the devil made me do it. Well, sometimes the devil did, and his name is fucking Zeta Reticulum J Rod R684149, you know, sitting in a base, fucking around with their head. So while the technology and interaction was profound, I had many epiphanies. It definitely elevated my consciousness, for sure. It blew my mind. But I then was able to look at the world and see what was truly happening in the name of this thing. And I didn't like it, and I don't believe in it. And I think human slavery is wrong. And until the human species admits this is here doing this, we will never be a free race. We will always be under a master slave, whether it be to the monetary system, to the police, or to the alien. They're all the same to me at this point. Another reason why a lot of the authority cult on this earth are Masonic. Like 3/4 of our police officers in the United States are in a fraternal order of sheriffs. I'm not saying they all know what we know about this stuff, but they know some.
Look, I don't deny that, you know, secret fraternities, occult groups are not aware of this thing. Certainly they are. And then, you know, a lot of occult groups developed into the intelligence programs, and they are trying to utilize it for their own means. But I don't think the source is some malevolent technology. I think the source is some benevolent substructure of this very creation. And you know, I think there is of course, I believe there is a spiritual element to creation. Yeah, I don't think you can have physicality without spirituality. And people who, you know, bad people wanted to take over the world, they did a lot of hard work for millennia to try and understand this spiritual place that we're in. And you know, it's not hard to believe that they have come to know the spiral code, and they are trying to utilize it. They are trying to weaponize it, and perhaps even mimic it and its effects through mind-altering drugs and secret nanotechnology. But I would think that as people are waking up to it, they will also try to spin the truth and get people to believe that, nah, don't worry, it's just all fake alien technology. It's not like a real spiritual thing that humanity is supposed to attain and have an interaction with. Nah, don't think about this. Stay in your lowly sleeping state. And I don't know, I think you were open to this, and they got you. They got you to believe that it is a fake, a thing that is produced by a materialistic technology that is also malevolent, and not some great spiritual thing, some enlightenment that happened within you, something that you need to share with the rest of mankind. And by doing this will set us free. This will result in us getting back into the Garden of Eden and having joy in the experience of creation.
Yeah, there's a lot of like new age stuff that comes out of it. There's spiritual healers. I'm an indigo child, and all these other things that come out. And there's very positive sides to it. But what most people don't want to accept is these people are dualistic. They live in the dark and the light. They will do evil and good if it means attaining their control of the Hegelian dialectic of the synthesis of planet Earth. And if they need to kill, they'll kill. And there's lots of people that have been killed in the name of this. And this is why I can't ever believe in the benevolence of it, other than the fact that these people that are being tricked by it don't really know the truth, because if they knew both sides of it, they would revolt. Like the Parkland shooter is a 19-year-old kid on drugs hearing demons telling him to kill, and many other drives to these MK Ultra assassins that have been created as a result of interfacing with similar technology in this regard. So while I believe there are some people on Earth that are enlightened by this stuff, they are put down a good path, they're taken care of, they look after each other very well. Nepotism is strong in this, as long as you do what's best for the collective, because that's effectively what they're creating, is a collective ideology that they will then puppet people to believe. This is why I believe it's a threat to democracy as it stands, because they can affect the vote. They're controlling millions of people that will whisper and tell things to other people through this technology that we've now hidden for 70 years. And this is why the presidents of the last 30 years up till Trump were a total fucking circus show. They thought Hillary was going to win for a reason, because they fucking have half that fucking DNC chipped and told what to do, as far as I'm concerned. So a part of it is, and then that next phase of world order is religious mindset. And if you research any of the great work and resetting of the monetary system and things that are going on, the great reset that's happening, there's a lot coming, and a lot of this is influenced by this. Like, there are millions of people interacting with this. A lot of them are too scared of sounding crazy. If you ever look at like Britney Spears when she's talking on TV or something, and then she just like freezes for a minute, or like Al Roker when he just freezes for a minute, they're freezing for a minute because they're being telepathically beaconed to tell them to say something or stop saying something, or don't go down that path. So there's a lot of the entertainment industry convinced. There's tons of lyrics within the 70s, 80s, 90s, and so forth that come out talking like Zeppelin's Kashmir, I'm a Traveler of Time and Space, Starman, David Bowie, and all this sci-fi stuff that was coming out because they were being drugged and then influenced by it to influence their art that would then influence the world, because they knew that this Illuminati kind of mindset around the entertainment industry has large implications globally. So it's a total mind fuck. I understand. I've been able to decipher quite a lot of it. And again, you are right in that not all of it is negative. So for some, it can be positive. They will pay people money. They have all the money in the world. The world banking system is run by 8,500 people, and they are all Luciferians, like whether you want to believe it or not. And their interaction with these beings was this Luciferian doctrine that Albert Pike talks about, and all this other stuff. The synagogue of Satan, the shaitan, like all this stuff is interactions with these technologies. And these people at this point in life know this. They're now considered transhumanists. And some of them will hold on to their religious, spiritual side of it, not wanting to accept this godlike interaction as with these technologies. But I refuse to live a lie, and I will speak about it as such.
So, Shogun, what about you? How has it influenced you?
Well, that's a very large question. And I think it will require additional podcasts to cover. I've had multiple encounters with the spiral code process. Even before I was 19, the first big one was 19. It's happened periodically through my life. Sometimes, psychedelics like psilocybin cubensis have been involved. Other times, not. And I guess what I would say is I believe that the spiral code runs at least in two different directions, right? So my understanding when I'm in that process, like Dreamly calls it the divine dance, And that's a good way to look at it, because if you think of dancing, right, like the Sufis do with their arms out, you can spin in one direction or you can spin in the other direction. And in the Hindu cosmology, I believe that when the world is coming to an end, or the universe is running its course and reaching sort of the apocalypse period, I think it's Shiva who begins to dance, right? And by dancing, he essentially reverses the spiral, right? He reverses the flow of time and entropy that is leading to catastrophe, and he, by his divine dance, is able to spin it back in the other direction. And when I'm having these experiences, this is often how I feel like what I'm called to do. I have to do this, right? Whether it's on a cosmic scale or perhaps only on like a local scale. And so it's very important to interpret how to run the spiral in the correct direction. And I've had experiences where I ran the spiral in the incorrect direction, and when it ended, so to speak, it kind of left me stranded, like high and dry, in a very like desolate situation. I actually felt that I had lost my soul at that time. I thought I was totally screwed, lost my soul. But it turns out that's not the case. And actually, as I was correctly told by actually Grizzly Gorilla, for those of you who know it, I had to go back into the spiritual dimension, right? And essentially regain my soul, or to put it another way, turn the spiral in a different direction. I guess what I will say is they say that the shaman swims in the same waters that the madman drowns in. And as I say, and Jesus Christ walked on those waters, right? So there's different levels of interaction with this madness, this synchronicity, this ocean of high strangeness. And one of my more recent experiences, I feel like I actually did it perfectly, right? I actually called it speed running. I did it like really fast and really efficiently and totally in the correct way, in the correct direction. And a whole bunch of incredibly positive things happened for me and happened for other people. Again, I'm Christian, and multiple people came to Jesus Christ, as I actually literally evangelized to them. I led multiple people to Jesus Christ. I myself had a born again spiritual experience on May 20th of this year. And that, in my opinion, was an example of the spiral going in the right direction, right? So in other words, as we know, there's both like malevolent and benevolent spiritual forces. There is both, quote unquote, heaven and hell, metaphorically speaking. And when it comes to the spiral code, it can go in either direction. And I don't know how much that is the code's decision or God's decision, and how much it's how we orient ourselves to it. But one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast is because I believe it's actually possible to get better at this, and possibly even to define it as a skill, like martial arts or engineering or something, like to actually learn how to process this in the correct and efficient way. And if that were true, it would be helpful for me, because most likely I will end up in this situation multiple times again before the end of my life. Now, all I can say then is there's been times when this experience has been devastating, worse than the worst thing that most people will ever experience, literally kind of hell on earth. There's been other times when it was heaven on earth, and the best of the.
And well, you talking about the spiral flowing in different directions, one positive, one negative. For me, it felt like those ethereal veils lifting or falling. As I make a bad decision, then the veil behind me would fall, and the evil would get closer to me, as it's chasing me through this maze. Or if I made a good decision, then a protective, ethereal, angelic veil would lift behind me and protect me from this thing, and a veil in front of me would fall, opening or making that which I pursue, like the good thing, I don't know how to describe it, making it closer to me. So I guess, yeah, this is like, well, there was this one time in this few days that I experienced it, that I perhaps have made one bad decision after the other, and I was interacting with things I rather not mention, like people and doing stuff that I rather not mention now. And I ended up in my bed. I lied down, and I felt underneath the covers a snake, a big snake. And I got so terrified. I screamed and I kicked it, and I ran away. Sadly enough, it wasn't a snake, it was my dog. But at the moment, it felt like a snake. I could feel its cold, scaly skin slithering. I felt it. But no, it was my dog, and I kicked it. It was just underneath the covers. I didn't see it. And now, having to interpret it and understand why would such a thing happen, I think, yeah, I messed up in this dance. I messed up in the code. The evil got so close to me that it manifested as my dog, my innocent dog. But again, I said everything becomes a fractal. It reflects things from all over the world into your own sphere of experience. What you can touch, feel, see, hear, smell, and taste. So it manifested inside my dog. I kicked it because it deserved some form of a karmic punishment, as did my dog. I don't know what my dog did in this life or in previous life, but it deserved some form of a karmic punishment, which is why the dance or the spiral set it up so that if I would fail, and I failed, which is why I failed the snake, in such a way that I would be compelled to kick it, and I did because it deserved some form of a punishment. I deserve the punishment of being terrified and feeling like, oh my god, a snake is about to eat me, because it felt like a huge anaconda. And the scene from Harry Potter where Nagini, the Voldemort snake, eats Professor Snape alive. That's what it felt like it was about to happen to me. So I don't know what form of a butterfly effect I created at that moment, but I believe there was a form of a butterfly effect that happened, as well as many other butterfly effects that happened throughout this few days. And wow, I really want to get into this again and feel it again. And yeah, I feel like we are destined, that humanity would achieve this consciousness that we are describing. Only I believe it's spiritual, divine, and benevolent.
I'll
And
explain
it
some
puts
butterfly.
things in order.
I'm sorry. I was going to say I can explain some butterfly effect scenarios too on our next podcast, because I had some prophetic things that affected reality as well. So I know that they do interface psychically, quote quote, with things in reality that have real world implications.
So this was really fantastic. I'm sorry that I didn't speak that terribly much. I was distracted with certain things that came up, but I really appreciate this. And I think we should do an additional podcast on this, at least. I might do one where I go more deeply into my experiences. Maybe we can have an episode 2 on this. But I'm just wondering, does anyone want to have a closing statement? Maybe Dreamily make a closing statement, NSA make a closing statement, and I'll make a closing statement. Would that make sense? Or rather than that, before we do that, we should probably open it up for questions. Is there anybody in the audience who has a question or a comment? Okay, so that being the case, Dreamily, or actually NSA, since I think Dreamily spoke last. I can't remember who spoke last, but
I think I did, but I'll make mine quick. Reality is not what it seems. There isn't another dimension out there interacting. We just can't see frequencies of energy that they can manipulate, and this is our misinterpretation of the divine. Many people on Earth know this secret and know that we are being lied to. The cover-up is real, and there's a lot of money in it. And if you wanted to believe it or not, Lucifer had the whole world deceived. He will come to you as an angel of light. That's all I have to say.
Reality is not what it seems. There is another dimension out there, a spiritual dimension, serving as the substructure of our physical world, created and designed by benevolent God. And many people are not aware of the substructure, but we actually all have the capacity to expand our consciousness to the sufficient degree to interact with that substructure. And once we start interacting with it, it mainly does so through intuition and symbology. So an education in symbolism, theology, religion, spirituality, and the occult world will be extremely beneficial to those who enter the spiral code or dance the divine dance. Um, Again, I think it is the ideal state of consciousness for humanity. It is our destiny to regain it collectively, and once we do so, we will manifest the Garden of Eden on Earth. Lastly, I actually think this wasn't a beneficial podcast because we weren't able to be as coherent as I would have liked us to be. I think we're going to need another podcast, or perhaps even more than one, to actually start getting into describing more what it feels like and what are some of the experiences, and perhaps have less of formal conversation where we all get a few minutes to talk. No, I think the conversation should be more flowing between Shogun, NSA, and I, where perhaps even try and interrupt each other, because how non-coherent the subject is inherently. We do need to build off of each other, build off of each other's ideas, and by doing so, the audience will get a better perspective and a better glimpse as to what we're actually talking about and what it actually feels like. And with that, your turn, Shogun. Go ahead.
Sure. And I just want to say I definitely don't agree that it wasn't a beneficial podcast, because, as I said, this is such an incredibly difficult issue to even speak about, right? It's very complicated and it's very subtle. So I knew we were going to need sort of an icebreaker episode, right? So with this episode, we've laid out some foundations, and when we touch on this again, we'll be building off this foundation, which I think will go a long way. I do want to apologize, though, because I had intended to be much more engaged with it, and I just got caught up in things that were happening externally, just coincidentally at the same time, and so I sincerely apologize for that. And next time, I'll be sure to, set aside some space that I have total attention for it. So essentially, all I want to say is that, to summarize what I want people to take away from this episode, there exists a process. There exists a pattern. There exists a program, which is an experience, but it is a structured experience. It originates somewhere different than the mundane world, and it can catch us up for a period of time and carry us along. Perhaps if you think of like a leaf floating in the river, the stream is going one way, right? And then all of a sudden, maybe an eddy or a current catches the leaf and pulls it in a looping circle or in some other such thing. I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but this can happen to people. And I think this parallels with what we call spiritual experiences. It parallels with what NSA is talking about. It is, if you experience it, like the most profound and mind-blowing thing you probably ever experience, right? For better or for worse. And in that experience, you can actually potentially manifest abilities and so forth that you wouldn't normally have, like the ability to predict the future or whatever the case may be. And it's almost as though, if you imagine that reality is like a Truman Show, or if your reality is like a dream, it's like it starts winking at you and interacting with you in a way it normally doesn't, if you see what I'm saying. Or if it's a simulation, right? It's almost like the computer program starts communicating with you in the game. The Matrix sort of interacts with you, right? There's so much more to say about this. All I can say, I guess, for now is thank you so much to NSA and Dreamly for sharing your experiences. Thank you, everybody, for listening in on this podcast. We will definitely do another episode. Also, please join us in half an hour for the episode on serial killers and true crime, hosted by Sir Anna. That should be a great episode. Again, in this very same channel, 30 minutes from now. And tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central, we're going to have episode 3 of Philosophy with Jigmo. This episode will be on Aristotle, so I'm looking forward to that very much. And make sure you subscribe and follow us on YouTube and BitChute, the Roundtable Podcast, over 160 episodes uploaded. And of course, join the Roundtable Discord server where we record this content every single day. Thanks so much, guys. I will see you up in Roundtable 1 with me.